Hello, I am Mrs. Ujjwala Madne, Department of English, Devadi College, Devadi. Dear student, let us discuss about Aristotle and his ideas of a tragedy today. The critical enquiry had begun almost in the 4th century BC in Greece. Plato, the great follower of Socrates, was the first person who examined poetry as a part of his moral philosophy. Plato's critical observation on poetry we can observe in his two books that lies in the Ion, the Symposium, the Republic and the Laws. In the Ion, he advocated poetry as a genuine piece of imaginative literature, but in the Republic, which is a treatise on his concept of an ideal state, he rejected poetry on a moral and a philosophical grounds. Plato was a great moral philosopher. He was mainly concerned with the including moral values in the society and seeking the ultimate truth. For him, poetry is immoral and imitative in nature. So, he himself is ready to blame that poetry as it is immoral and it is imitative in nature. On the other hand, Aristotle, the most distinguished disciple or scholar of the Plato, he wrote something about this poetry in his books. Plato was a critic, scholar, logician and a practical philosopher. He is known for his treatise, the Poetics, the Rhetoric, dealing with the art of poetry and art of speaking respectively. Aristotle examined poetry and he examined poetry as a form of art and evaluated that poetry and its constituent elements on the basis of its aesthetic beauty. Aristotle actually observed the available things which we find in the poetry. The form of its constituent element on the basis of its aesthetic beauty. Aristotle actually observed the available forms of literature and analyzed them and codified the rules. In his work, he has described the characteristic of a tragedy, comedy and epic. We can observe all these things in his writing. Classical criticism views the literary work as a imitation or a reflection or a representation of the world and human life. The primary criterion applied to work is that of a truth of its representation to the subject matter and it represents or should represent. In his Poetics, that is in 4th century, Aristotle defined poetry as an imitation of a human action. The poem takes an instant of human action and represent it in a new medium or a material, that of words. Aristotle distinguished poetry from other arts. For example, he distinguished poetry from other artistic media, the kind of action imitated and the manner of imitation. That is media, manner, he himself is ready to differentize. For example, dramatic or a narrative. He also makes a distinction between the various poetic kinds such as drama, epic, tragedy and comedy. Aristotle Poetics provide a classic analysis of the form of a tragedy. His analysis is based on the tragedies of a Greek dramatist. So, Aristotle makes a classification with the help of a Greek dramatist such as Sophocles. Aristotle defined tragedy as follows. we can see the definition of a tragedy by Aristotle. Let us see what is that definition. Tragedy then is an imitation of action that is serious, that is and complete. What is meant by serious? Let us see. That must be serious, that may not be a humorous one. Then he himself is ready to give second criteria, that tragedy must be complete one. Whenever he uttered the word complete, he means to say that there is a need of a beginning, there is a need of a middle, and there is a need of the end for that tragedy. So tragedy is, that must be imitation, but that imitation must be serious, that imitation must be complete, and that imitation must be, the most important thing, certain magnitude. Means we can see length of that tragedy may not be too much or may not be a shortest one. In language, which language we can use in that particular tragedy? That language which is the language with the artistic ornament, a language enriched with each kind of artistic ornament. Means we can observe artistic ornament in a tragedy. That is the opinion of Aristotle. We can observe in his definition. And artistic ornament, we can see several kinds being found in the separate part of the play. We can find these ornaments in several kinds, and that is in a separate part of the play. And the most important thing, which emotions we can observe in the tragedy, these two emotions are pity and fear. An effect of that pity and fear, that is, which is called as a catharsis. So let us see the definition of tragedy by Aristotle once again. Tragedy, that is an imitation of action that is serious, that must be serious, that must be complete, with beginning, with the middle, and with the end, and that must be in a certain magnitude. Language which we can observe in the tragedy, that should be, that language should be with that which artistic ornament which we can find in every part of the play, and the emotions which we can observe in the tragedy, that emotions must be pity and fear, which is called as a catharsis. Further he says, Aristotle says that tragic hero will evoke both pity and fear. If we observe a tragic hero, the concept of tragic hero of Aristotle, we can see that hero must evoke pity and fear in the mind of the audience, and then only he will be called as a proper tragic hero. If he is neither thoroughly good nor thoroughly evil, but a mixture of both, that hero may not be good person or may not be bad person, hero should be mixture of a good and bad things, then only he may be proper to be called as a hero of the tragedy. Mixture of both, and also that tragic effect will be stronger if the hero is higher than ordinary moral worth. So hero must be there with the ordinary moral worth, and then it is possible to create pity and fear in the minds of the audience. Such a man suffers changes in fortune. That hero must suffer changes in his fortunes. Which changes we can observe? Let us see. That changes are like happiness to misery because of a mistaken act. That changes we can observe because of his own journey from happiness to journey, and then it is possible to create pity and fear in the minds of the audience, which is called as his journey from happiness to miserable things is called as a hamartia in criticism, which is called, his own mistake is called as error of judgment. Then let us see, that is something about the concept of a tragedy. What is the concept of tragedy by Aristotle? Let us see. The concept of tragedy is like this. Aristotle's Poetic is a celebrated work of a literary criticism. Aristotle's Poetics is most important work in the criticism. We can't avoid that particular work. It is basically on an answer to Plato's Republic. Though Aristotle himself is a follower of Plato, he is ready to give answer to his own teacher, that is Plato. In Plato, we can see that he himself is ready to have objection towards poetry, but Aristotle himself is ready to give answer to that objection in his own treatise, which is called as the Poetics. The Poetics about the art of poetry in general, but it mainly focuses epic and tragedy also. Though it is about poetry, but we can see that Aristotle himself is ready to focus upon tragedy, and so we observe a definition of tragedy. That in that definition we can see he is ready to give importance for seriousness, he is ready to give importance for completeness, and he is ready to observe two emotions in that definition, and these two emotions are pity and fear. There are 26 chapters in Poetics, out of which 14 are devoted only for tragedy. So, Poetics is with 24 chapters with, now we can see that concept of tragedy only in 14 chapters. So, it is clear that Aristotle gave much importance to tragedy in his Poetics than that of epic or another things. Epic and tragedy were considered to be the ideal form of literature in the ancient age. He gave too much importance to tragedy because at that age, epic and also tragedy also concerned as a most important form of literature in ancient age. Hence, the Poetic concentrated on a tragedy in a particular. Aristotle views and catharsis are found in chapter 6 and chapter 14 of the Poetics. We will continue the same in the next lectures. Till then, bye. Thank you.